Hey everybody, it's me, Justin from Stormland, and it's time for Stormland Listens to Stormland, and that means we're going to listen to the latest single, the third single from The Human Cost. That is Rebuilt For Your Whims, featuring the one, the only, Dr. Ross Sewage. As you can see, one of the best in his field. Alright, so without further ado, let's hear the song.
No history, just names and physical data. Yet, meant to exist as people you call them. Biocomputers to assert control. You had the race to dehumanize. Taught only violence and hate. Series after series, no drugs. Steroids, hormones, and surgeries. A stolen childhood to present. It has warped and broken. Forced into dependency.
Can you tell I was listening to a lot of Suffocation and Slam at the time I wrote that? Yeah, no, there's definitely hints of stuff like Pathology, Acrania, Stillbirth, and, as I said, Suffocation, but you'll also hear, so I think you'll hear Abysmal Dawn and Fear Factory in there as well. So, let's start things off. Lyrically, you probably saw me throwing this and then throwing footage of the Calamity, Raider, and Forbidden Gundams, that's in reverse order, onto the screen with the video from the official Gundam YouTube channel. Yes, and that's because this song is inspired by the eugenicist, racist, fascist who was in charge of Blue Cosmos and Gundam Seed, that being Maruta Azrael. I mean, a blonde, blue-eyed white guy stirring people up into a frenzy to attack an other over perceived genetic differences. Seems kind of familiar. Anyways, what happened within the Gundam Seed show was these biological CPUs, I refer to them as biocomputers in the lyrics right off the bat, were basically, no, they have no history. That history was erased. Looks like they were orphans. They were horrifically, surgically, chemically altered and psychologically twisted to become these killing machines bent on wiping out anybody who had any sort of genetic modification, those being the coordinators in the series. Now, the coordinators had their own supremacist leadership, and that's something to be dealt with in other songs, but the whole point of this song was to look at the kind of evil, entitled person that would quite literally rebuild other humans to carry out their murderous whims. And that's how you get rebuilt for your whims. Now, there's some cool stuff going on in the song, and the first thing I want to start with is what I call the C part.
Series after series, no drugs. Steroids, hormones, and surgeries. A stolen childhood to present. It's warped and broken.
Alright, now, here in the first section with the halftime drums, there's a really active hi-hat going on there. That's really funk-inspired. And I know it's like, what's the death metal guy doing with funk drumming? It doesn't sound like funk. Maybe not in that context, but that kind of active hi-hat work is very common in up-tempo funk. And as it moves into the full-time section, you hear that activity transferred over to the cymbal, that kind of skittering diddly diddly. That's very Gene Hoglan influenced, and I hope people will hear that in the programming. I try and study a lot of drummers, a lot of drumming techniques, a lot of drum patterns, and put that into my programming. I may not be able to necessarily play it on a kit, but I understand the basics of it, and I understand what it's supposed to do. And that's something I've put a lot of time and effort into getting a handle on. Now, the riff, that kind of vertical crawl, going up and down from the B to the low E to the low E. That's very Abysmal Dawn inspired. And, same with the B section. I'll put that on right now, the B section.
The race to the human race. Taught only violence and hate.
Those crawling riffs are very much inspired by Abysmal Dawn. I think if you caught me on the Glacially Musical podcast where we talked about favorite live albums, you would have heard me talk about Charles Elliott of Abysmal Dawn being a highly underrated guitar player. And this bit of influence, this is nothing compared to what he does, and he plays and sings that live. Think about that for a second. He does these finger twisting parts, and he does very intense vocals over top of it live. So go listen to some Abysmal Dawn after we're done watching this. All right, next I want to go over the lead section, because that's just fun, especially starting off here. Yes, that is, thus spake Zarathustra, or Zarathustra, however you say it. Yes, that is Ric Flair's theme. Why did I use it? It sounded right going into the part. I like to throw in little quotes, and maybe not necessarily always in the guitar solos. I'll throw in little quotes and lyrics as well, but it worked there, and I think it's a great hook going into what I called the transition section there. Now you hear me doing the single note bends there to keep a sense of intensity there over the cadence, which is very much inspired by Fear Factory. If you hear the song New Breed off Demanufacture, there's a part where Burton goes, "Born, bred, beaten, born, bred, beaten." And that's the same thing, the same cadence on the riff. And so, Dino's doing something a little more intense on the guitar in the original song, but yes, Dino Cazares, if for whatever reason you're watching this, I owe you a sandwich. Okay, next we're going to move on to the second half of that solo where I do something I've always wanted to do and finally got good enough to pull off. Yes, that big Jeff Loomis style descending run at the start of the second half of the solo there. Oh, I've always wanted to be able to do something like that, and I'm finally at a point where I can. I'm still not going to be sweet picking, but I can start to insert those shreddier little bits into my playing. And I've been playing for guitar for over half my life at this point, and lead work has not been my strongest suit, and I'm finally starting to get to a point where it's still never going to be what I hear in my head, but it's getting closer. And then, of course, we go into the transition part one last time. And you hear me using the double stop bends this time instead of just a single note. And that's, again, ratcheting up the intensity before we go into the valley of the C, of the C part there. Dynamically, this song is about peaks and valleys. Start slow, rising action, bring it down, bring it back up, and that's it. It's a ride. It's a musical ride, and I want you to take that every time you listen to it. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. I could go on forever and ever, but you've got things to do. I've got things to do. And one thing you need to do is head to stormland.bandcamp.com, because The Human Cost is out September 30th. And you may just want to pre-order it because you've heard Test Subject, you've heard Esper, and now you've heard Rebuilt for Your Whims. And there's still 5 more songs you haven't heard. And any one of these songs could have been singles. That's how strongly I feel about the material on this album, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, stormland.bandcamp.com. On September 30th, you will know The Human Cost. So until then, have a good one.